Thank you for the kind introduction, and lovely to be with you, at least in this way. So hopefully you can all see a slide that says Agile product roadmaps. And as you've probably heard, that's the topic I'm going to talk about now. So product roadmaps are a traditional product management tool, and they've been used for decades by product people, by product managers. Now, I'd like to explore with you to which extent they can help Scrum product owners, to which extent they can be applied in an Agile Scrum-based context. And to get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about what product roadmaps are and what type of product roadmaps are traditionally used. And I don't know how this is for you, but it's now the middle of November. The days are getting shorter. It's getting darker earlier. And it's been quite rainy here in the UK where I live. And this time of year, I start longing for some sun, and I start thinking about the next summer holiday. In an area I'm very fond of, and I've had the good fortune to visit a few times over the years and spend some holiday at, is this one here. The lake that you can see is called Tegernsee, and the whole area is also called Tegernsee. It's a place in southern Germany, in southern Bavaria, close to the Austrian border. And there are a number of reasons why I like the area. First of all, the lake really is beautiful. You can go for leisurely strolls along the lakes, and there's some really good ice cream shops. You can take the boat across the lake and change your perspective and see the mountains. Talking about the mountains, you can go for walks in the mountains, for hikes, or as I did here when I took this picture, I went for a gravel ride, for a bicycle ride. So as I said, an area I'm very fond of, and assuming that my family and I would like to visit the area next year and spend our summer holiday there, well, it'd be natural for me to do a little bit of road mapping, and assuming that we want to drive there, think about the various options, route options to get from the UK to southern Germany. And so I might use Apple Maps, Google Maps, or another mapping tool, possibly, if I can find it, even a paper-based road map to think about those options. And the first question I have to answer is, how do we get from the UK? So you can see I live not too far away from London. How do we get from the UK to France? Should we take the ferry, or should we take the train, the shuttle? And then should we drive via Brussels or via Reims, so through Belgium or through France? And then when you look at the journey time, it's fairly long. Maybe we should break it up. Maybe I should consider booking a hotel to stay overnight. And even if that's not the case, it might be worthwhile anticipating longer breaks where we can recharge the car, or possibly refuel the car and stretch our legs. Mm-hmm. So as I said, for a longer road trip, for a longer journey, car journey, it'd be natural for me to do a little bit of anticipation, a little bit of planning, use a product roadmap to see how the journey might unfold. And generally speaking, I would recommend that as Scrum product owners, we do the same thing for our products and use a product roadmap. Now, what is a product roadmap? As many terms in product management, different people have different interpretations of what a product roadmap is, what this term means. So let me share mine with you. For me, a product roadmap is an actionable plan, an actionable product plan. It shows how a product is likely to grow, how it's likely to evolve over the coming months. And it should state the specific value the product is likely to create. Now, generally speaking, I do find product roadmaps helpful. I do find they can be helpful tools for Scrum product owners. And there are several reasons, two of which I'd like to share with you briefly. The first one is they offer a continuity of purpose, as they typically cover several major releases or product versions. So when you work with Scrums, there's, sometimes teams only think from sprint to sprint, from sprint goal to sprint goal. And that can lead to, quite a, how should I put this, quite a limited view of what's ahead. And I think it's kind of nice to think about a time frame of 6 to 12 months, and what are some major goals that we want to achieve? What is the value that we want to create? What's the journey that we want to take our product on, and create that continuity, describe the bigger picture. And second, I find that product roadmaps are a great stakeholder alignment, engagement, management tool, and they're much better suited, in my experience, to help the stakeholders understand where we want to take our products compared to the product backlog, which often contains just a little bit too much detail, and it's too changeable, too volatile. So as I say, generally speaking, I would recommend that you consider using a product roadmap for your product. However, it's not uncommon for me that people say to me, hold on, Roman, aren't product roadmaps old school? Aren't they waterfall-based plans? And aren't they anti-agile? And like with any tool, in my mind, it very much depends on how we use this tool, how we use a product roadmap. Now, traditionally, a product roadmap is a list of features, a list of pieces of functionality that are mapped onto a timeline. And this is pretty much what this product roadmap here is. So it's very nicely visualized. And it's one of the first roadmap images that appears if you Google for product roadmap on Google Images. So this is where I've got this picture from. So very nicely visualized. But if you take a closer look on the pieces of information that are being captured on this plan, you'll see single sign-on, for instance, or Facebook integration, or search improvements. Now, these are all features, new features that should be provided, or feature enhancements that should be implemented. But these pieces of information, these features, don't tell us why it is beneficial to offer single sign-on or offer Facebook integration. So what's the value for the users that we want to create, or what's the value for the business that we want to generate? So that's open. And what such a traditional product roadmap is referred to commonly is a feature-based roadmap. It's focused on the features, it's focused on the outputs, it's focused on the deliverables. Now, there are a number of issues with traditional feature-based roadmaps, and it's one of the reasons why some people say don't use roadmaps at all. The first one is, well, they are feature-based, they're output-focused, and we worry sometimes then more about adding features to the roadmap and creating an ever-increasing number of features rather than asking why we're doing it. And in the worst case, that can give rise to a feature factory. Second, such a feature-based roadmap, can be driven by individual stakeholder requests. Sometimes stakeholders compete to get their features onto the product roadmap. And if we're not very careful, we're creating a loose collection of features rather than a cohesive product. We're creating what's referred to as a Frankenstein product, a product with a terrible value proposition and a horrible user experience. And then finally, if the features are comparatively small, we're solutionizing at a very early stage, and sometimes stakeholders then assume this feature-based plan, because it has all these details, is a commitment rather than, a best guess of how the journey that we want to take our product on is likely to unfold. So my recommendation is, don't use traditional feature-based roadmaps, certainly not in an agile context. I don't think they're well suited to an environment where we assume that there is change, that there's uncertainty, and maybe a degree or an element of innovation. Now, if generally speaking, product roadmaps can be useful or are useful product management tools, but traditional feature-based roadmaps are not, what kind of product roadmap should we use then? Well, my answer to this question is use product roadmaps that have the following 4 qualities. First, they are outcome-based. They first and foremost talk about the specific value that our product should create over the coming months. Second, they are connected. It'd be a mistake to look at the product roadmap as a plan that's isolated from other artifacts, from other plans, but it's important to have it systematically related to a vision, maybe a product strategy, and certainly the product backlog. It should be shared. That's the third quality. So it should be clear, and people should have a shared understanding, but also, the development teams, team members, and the stakeholders should sufficiently support the roadmap. And finally, it should not be set in concrete, but you should inspect and adapt a product roadmap on a regular basis. So those are 4 qualities that I recommend an effective product roadmap should have. And I'd like to take you now through those 4 qualities in a little bit more detail. And initially, I'd like to talk about outcome-based product roadmaps. And in order to make the conversation a little bit more specific, I'd like to discuss a specific outcome-based or goal-oriented roadmap with you. You're looking here at a structure, a roadmap template that I created a number of years ago. Now, as I said, this is to make the conversation a little bit more concrete. If this template does resonate with you, that's great. You can download it for free from my website. If it doesn't resonate with you, if you don't like it, it's equally great. This is not about selling you or persuading you to use a specific template, but as I said, to illustrate the central idea behind a goal-oriented outcome-based roadmap. And as you can tell, I use the terms goal-oriented and outcome-based interchangeably. Sometimes people also talk about benefit-based roadmaps, problem-based roadmaps, themed roadmaps. So, the various names, various terms people use in order to refer to roadmaps, where the central element, which is here on this template located right in the middle, the central element is the goal, is the outcome, is the benefit that your product should offer. So that might be to acquire new users or more users. It might be to increase engagement. It might be to increase conversion. It might be to reduce churn, or it might be to future-proof the product by reducing technical debts. And those would all be sample goals. And by the way, I'll show you how you can apply this template on the next slide, but I'll take you through the structure and the key elements. I'll take you through those first. So a good way to ensure that the goal really does describe an outcome is to ask the why question. Why is it worthwhile to develop and progress a product? And that's what you should capture here. And generally speaking, with any outcome-based goal-oriented roadmap, that's probably what you want to do first. You want to first ask yourself, what is the specific value that we want to create with our product over the coming, say, 6 to 12 months? But then, as you can tell, there are other elements that are captured on this roadmap. And the next one I'd like to draw your attention to is the one at the top, a date. So the date or time frame when the goal should be met. Now, if you should put dates on a product roadmap has been a topic of great debate in product management for a number of years. There are some people that say, no, oh my God, you must not put any dates on your roadmaps. And then there are people who say like, well, why not? So as often, it all depends on the context. If you create a public roadmap that is communicated to customers, clients, that is externally visible, then I would recommend that you do not use any specific dates, but rather big, coarse-grained, loose timeframes, for instance, in the first half of 2024 and in the second half of 2024. But if you build a product roadmap for an internal audience, for development teams and stakeholders, then I would recommend that you include dates or specific timeframes. Why? Well, ideally, you'd like to meet all goals, fully meet all goals on time and on budget. But in reality, as you probably know from your own experience, that's not always possible. In software development, things can go wrong. And then it's important to be able to understand what is more important, fully meeting a goal or adhering to a date, assuming that you can't just increase your budget. And even if you can increase your budget, you may not be able to find enough people with the right skills quickly enough so that they can become productive and really make a positive impact. So often you have to make a trade-off decision if something goes wrong or not quite according to plan between, as I said, date adherence and fully meeting a goal. And so it's important to think about a date or a specific time frame in order to maximize value creation. There are a few more other elements on this roadmap. The one at the bottom talks about the metrics, the measurements that help us understand if we've met the goal. So it's great to have a big aspirational vision that acts as the true north and offers some fundamental alignment. But here, when we create goals, when we set goals on a product roadmap, these goals should be specific, they should be detailed, and ideally, they're measurable. And so it can be useful, I find, to add metrics, add measurements to a roadmap to ensure that the goals are effective. And then, as you can see, I still like to add some features to a goal-oriented roadmap. However, there are 3 constraints. The first one is that any feature must serve a goal. So you can't just add a feature to a goal-oriented roadmap. So say your sales rep comes to you and says, I've just spoken to our most important customer, and they've told me if we only add this feature to the next release, or maybe one of the next releases, then they'll renew all their subscriptions and they'll buy many, many more. And so, it sounds promising, but then you'd have to take a look at the roadmap and see if there is a goal that this new feature supports. Is that feature required to meet one of the existing goals? And if the answer is no, well, you've got two choices. The first choice is to adapt, to change your product roadmap, maybe change an existing goal or introduce a new one. And the second option is to simply decline the request. But as I said, you can't just put a feature on a goal-oriented outcome-based roadmap. You always have to find or set a goal and outcome that this feature supports. Second, keep those features big and coarse-grained. No detailed pieces of functionality, no user stories, no epics, but really, really big coarse-grained capabilities. And I'll again show you an example shortly. And finally, no more than 3 to 5 features per goal with a preference on the smaller number. I would suggest you don't want to turn here this section into a mini product backlog. In fact, you'd like to minimize the overlap between a product roadmap and the product backlog as much as you can. Those should be distinct plans. Those should be distinct artifacts. And then finally, if meeting a goal results in a major release or new product version, then you can give it a name. Think of the interesting names that Android used a while back. I think my all-time favorite must be Marshmallow as a release name. So let's take a quick look how you might want to apply this template and what a sample goal-oriented outcome-based roadmap might look like. The context here is developing a new product development effort, and it's a healthy eating product, a product that should help people eat more healthily. And so a first goal for such a product might be to help the users understand their eating habits and acquire an initial user base. Now, when you look has two parts, a user-facing part and a business-facing part. Now, that's a preference I've developed over the past few years. When I started using goal-oriented roadmaps, I used to focus on the business goals. But as I said, I now find it really nice, helpful to have a user-facing and business-facing part in a goal. And those two parts have to come together to create the desired value. And it reflects the insight that products are value-creating vehicles. They exist to create value for users, possibly customers in the business. But you don't necessarily have to formulate your goals on the product roadmap in this way. Now, a second goal might be to help the users improve their eating habits and grow the user base, so another acquisition goal, and then help the users get fitter and generate revenue, and finally help the users meet their personal fitness targets and retain the users. And so I've identified goals, and then I've ordered them, I've prioritized them in such a way that a meaningful progression, a meaningful journey is generated. So that those goals are connected in a meaningful, logical way. Then I've thought about some timeframes, and I thought it might be possible and nice to meet those goals on a quarterly basis. And generally speaking, I find that goals on product roadmaps tend to work quite well when they cover a time frame somewhere between 6 weeks and 4 to 6 months. And 2 to 3 months is a time frame that a lot of teams use. So quarterly goals can work quite well. And then as meeting those goals is likely will result in a new product version, I've introduced some names here. These are rather boring names. The first name is MVP. MVP stands for minimum viable product. So that's the first public release. And then we have some features here. But if I can draw your attention to the features underneath the first goal, healthy eating dashboard and integration with smartwatches and fitness devices. So as I mentioned earlier, those two features are huge. They're really big. It doesn't really, it's not stated here what functionality should be shown on a healthy eating dashboard or what the look and feel should be like. And there's a very good reason for this. You want to give yourself the freedom to experiment with different ideas and to discover by running the early sprints as you're moving towards the first goal here, what the users really, what really works for the users and what functionality really should be displayed on the healthy eating dashboard. So I would really strongly encourage you not to specify the solution here and state any details, but again, use Scrum's inspect and adapt process to iteratively discover the right functionality. Yeah, don't prescribe it here. And then I've added some metrics at the bottom, even though most of the metrics are placeholders. They need to be reworked or instantiated. But the metrics of the first goal are probably okay, be in the top 15 Oh, I can't read it now. Oops, I'm sorry, because my Zoom bar is here. Let me just quickly move it. Be in the top 15 diabetes apps 6 weeks after launch. That's probably okay. Yeah. But generally speaking, for me, that would be a product roadmap that's good enough to make a go or no-go decision and say, okay, are we going to now build the actual product? Are we going to now start with the first sprint, moving towards the first goal? Or would it maybe be better to spend the time, money, and energy that we have available on a different innovation initiative? So that was the first quality. The second quality is to ensure that your product roadmap is connected, that it's not an isolated plan. So here, in order to discuss how you can systematically relate your roadmap to other plans, I'll use my product strategy framework. And that also allows me to position the product roadmap. So here's our roadmap, and it contains a number of elements that we've talked about. You see here the term product goal. So I look at the goals on a product roadmap, the outcomes on a product roadmap as product goals in the sense of the Scrum Guide. And I'll say a few more words about this shortly. Now, another goal that people often use, particularly in a Scrum context, is the vision. The vision describes the product's purpose, the positive change it should bring about. And the sample vision I gave you earlier was healthy eating, or help people eat more healthily. Now, how do we connect the product roadmap to the vision? And a vision that is hopefully inspiring, that hopefully resonates with people, that hopefully guides people, pulls people along? Well, by taking an intermediate step and formulating a product strategy. And a product strategy, in my mind, describes the approach to achieve a vision, and also, what makes the product successful, the approach that we've chosen to create a successful product. And there are 4 elements that I find particularly useful to capture in a strategy. The needs that we want to address, the problem or problems that the product should solve, or the benefits it should offer for the users, who the users and the customers are, the business benefits, and think about generating revenue, think about increasing productivity, think about reducing cost, for instance, and any standout features. And the standout features are particularly important for end user facing products and for commercial revenue generating products. Those are features that set the product apart from competing offerings and encourage customers to choose it instead of the alternatives. Yeah. Now, for me, the product strategy is an important prerequisite for coming up with an effective product roadmap. And it is an important prerequisite or foundation, particularly if it's been validated. So I find it generally really helpful to write down the needs we want to address with our product, who the users and customers are, the business goals, and for commercial products, the standout features. But writing them down is one thing. Another thing is having evaluated, having assessed those statements, and having addressed any significant risks and assumptions that they might contain, and having collected the relevant empirical evidence, the data, to show that these statements are likely to be correct, and that this strategy is a solid basis for creating an actionable product roadmap, a realistic product roadmap that can be implemented. Now, if you're wondering how you could possibly capture your vision and product strategy, you could use another template that I created, the product vision board. But again, there are other templates out there that allow you to do this job. So the key point is really that you think about what is the purpose of our product, the positive change we want to bring about, and what are those four key elements, needs, users and customers, business goals, and standout features, that you validate those statements, those pieces of information, collect the relevant empirical data, and then use that in order to make the right road mapping decisions. So a great way then to come up with the right goals, the right outcomes, the right product goals on your product roadmap is to look at the needs and look at the business goals on your roadmap and derive the product goals from them. Break the needs and business goals into smaller, more specific sub-goals. Or if that doesn't work for you, then make sure that any product goals that you discover, that you set, are aligned with the business goals and the needs in your strategy. And that way, the goals on your product roadmap help you implement and make progress towards the product strategy. And the product strategy helps you make progress towards your vision. So those plans are connected. So that's connecting the product roadmap to kind of the upfront or the upper parts of your innovation process. But what about execution? What about delivery? What about generating meaningful outputs? Well, this is where the product backlog comes into the picture. So the product backlog captures the outstanding work that's required to create or progress a product. So we have pieces of information in here like epics and user stories, or possibly workflow diagrams, sketches, mockups, and not to forget non-functional requirements, NFRs. Now, how do we connect the roadmap and the product backlog? The way I do it is, well, if I've already thought about goals and outcomes, tangible, specific, measurable outcomes on my product roadmap, then I might as well reuse them. And I might as well take the next outcome, the next product goal on my roadmap and literally copy it into my product backlog. Now, if that's what you do, then you create a goal-oriented, focused product backlog. And for me, that's a great thing, because many product backlogs that I've seen over the past 20 years were way too big. And a common reason for this is that it wasn't really clear what the items in the product backlog should achieve. Many of those product backlogs really just resembled loose wish lists. Items were added because a stakeholder requested them. The big boss said, you got to do this. Somebody from the development team thought it might be a good idea, or the product owner thought like, yeah, why not? Sounds good. Let's add this. But if you now use a product goal, you can first of all clear out your product backlog and remove any items from your product backlog that are not required to meet this goal. Okay. Now you don't necessarily have to delete those items; you can archive them. But yeah, clear out your product backlog. Then, if you use selected features on your roadmap, copy across those features into the product backlog. Think about additional bigger pieces of functionality that you have to implement in order to meet the product goal. Then prioritize them and start breaking down the high priority items into smaller items until you have product backlog items that fit into the next sprint and actually drive the next sprint. And that gives you a compact, it gives you a concise product backlog that is comparatively easy to maintain and adapt. And that tends to be particularly desirable, particularly beneficial for as long as your product is experiencing change and uncertainty. And that way you've also nicely tied your product backlog to the product roadmap. But as you can see from my recommendations, it assumes that you create the product roadmap first, and then the product roadmap offers you or provides you with the context to make the right detailed decisions for your product and capture them in your product backlog. So that was the idea of creating a roadmap that is connected to a vision and a higher level strategy, and then is used in order to help you make the right detailed product decisions and discover the right product functionality. What about shared? Well, your product roadmap, as awesome and amazing as it might be, would be pretty useless if the people who are meant to use the plan don't understand it or don't support it, don't agree with it. So rather than the Scrum product owner creating the product roadmap at their desk, locked away, I think, and then taking the plan and going from stakeholder to stakeholder and development team to development team or development team member to development team member, I think it's preferable really to bring the right people together and run a collaborative workshop and co-create a product roadmap. Yeah. So who do you need? Well, we need the Scrum product owner, the person in charge of the product. We need the development team, or if you work with several development teams, development team representatives. And I typically then like to suggest somebody with user experience skills, assuming that it is an end user facing product, somebody who has the right architecture and programming skills, and somebody who knows about quality assurance and control. And then I'd also invite the stakeholders who are key, whose expertise you need to make the right product decisions and create an effective product roadmap. So these key stakeholders for a commercial, a revenue-generating product might be a marketeer, a sales rep, a customer support team member, and possibly somebody from finance. Now, bringing those individuals together and having people here collaborate, co-create a roadmap from different business groups, departments, business units can be challenging. People might have different perspectives, are likely to have different perspectives. They might have different needs and different goals. So in order to avoid that the highest paid person's opinion wins and the most senior stakeholder thinks, oh, this is great, this is my show, I'll make all the decisions here. I think it's helpful to have somebody who can facilitate. And for me, that would be a qualified Scrum Master or Agile coach. So it ensures that everybody is heard and nobody dominates. Maybe establishes ground rules at the beginning of the workshop and then reminds people of those ground rules. Yeah. And particularly in an online environment, I find having a facilitator present can even be more important than when you have an on-site workshop. But either way, I very much recommend having a Scrum Master or skilled facilitator in the workshop so that the Scrum product owner can lead in the sense that ensuring that the right product decisions are being made and the right goals are being identified, and there's consistent decision making that's happening. And so a common mistake to avoid is to try and please everybody and please all the requests and ideas of people in the workshop attendees. But be aware of the fact that making road mapping decisions, making strategic decisions can be tough, and it requires us to say no. So, if we try and say yes to every idea, we're likely to create a product that tries to please everybody, but doesn't do a good job for anybody. Yeah. Now, as nice as it is to collaborate, and as much as I'm a fan of a collaborative approach, sometimes it's not possible to reach agreement within a realistic time frame. And then it's important that the Scrum product owner is empowered to have the final say. So my preference would always be to seek agreement here, reach agreement on a product roadmap, agree on a product roadmap. But if that is not possible, then the Scrum product owner, as I said, should have the authority to have the final word and make a decision. So that's a collaborative approach, and maybe some of you might be able to experiment with. So rather than the Scrum product owner creating the product roadmap, bring the right people together and co-create it. And that brings me to the final quality that I wanted to discuss with you, the idea that a product roadmap should be an adaptive plan and not something that we create once and then we execute over the next 12 months or 18 months or 24 months. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But, we should rather see it as a fluid plan, as a plan that is based on what we know at a given point in time. And just like, the plan we come up with to get to our holiday destination might change because, I don't know, a road might be closed. There might be a traffic jam, an accident. There might be bad weather. It happened to me not too long ago that we got rerouted because of bad weather. We have to change course and we have to change our plan. And there are two factors that I find helpful to understand. How often should you inspect and adapt your product roadmap? And that is how dynamic is the market and how stable is your product. So if there is a lot of change, then you may have to review your product roadmap on a monthly basis and possibly as part of a sprint review meeting. But if there's more stability, then quarterly reviews tend to be sufficient. And, usually when people aren't quite sure, how much change they're likely to experience, I suggest starting with quarterly reviews and then see if that frequency is too low or, if it's too high. If there's a lot of stability, sometimes you can push out roadmap reviews to every 4 to 6 months. And when you shoot for a somewhat longer time frame like quarterly reviews, you can typically combine the roadmap and the strategy reviews. And what that does is it establishes a strategic inspect and adapt cycle. So, in Scrum, hopefully we're used to a fortnightly, a 2-weekly inspect and adapt cycle based on our sprints, right? We state the sprint goal and then work is done. In order to achieve that sprint goal, we have a product increment available. We put it in front of the right people and listen to their feedback and figure out if we've reached the sprint goal or not. And that allows us then to inspect and adapt. It allows us to adapt our product backlog and adapt the product, change the product. Now that's great, and that works brilliantly if it's applied correctly on, the detailed level, a tactical level. You could say a more output or delivery focused level. And now we need to do the same thing on a strategic level. We need to introduce and establish a strategy process or a strategizing process and have a regular inspect and adapt cadence on that level. And as I said, a good cadence tends to be, at least as a starting point, quarterly reviews. So don't forget to review your roadmap. And that brings me to my summary. So I find product roadmaps useful product management tools, also in an Agile Scrum-based environment. They allow us to sketch the journey that we want to take our products on and the specific value that we want to create. However, in an Agile Scrum-based context, I strongly recommend that you use product roadmaps that are outcome-based, connected, shared, and adaptive, and that you refrain from using traditional feature-based roadmaps. And then finally, as I said, the Scrum product owner should be empowered, should have the final say on roadmap decisions if no agreement can be reached. That's necessary to allow us to progress the product and move forward. Well, I hope that what I had to say was a little bit useful for you. Thank you very much for your attention. If you found what I had to share beneficial, you can dive deeper into my product road mapping world and download the Go product roadmap, read articles, watch podcast episodes and videos on my website. And I also wrote a book called Strategize on Product Road Mapping Practices, which recently has been translated into German. So maybe for some of you that might be interesting as well to take a look at Strategize. So thank you for your attention again, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions. 4 questions at present. Thank you for submitting them. I appreciate it. The first one is, what is your go-to prioritization technique if you have one? And there's a little smiley that's been added. So yeah, thank you for that question. I'm not sure if the prioritization question is related to the product backlog or the product roadmap. And so I'll say a few words about product roadmap prioritization and about product backlog prioritization, just to be on the safe side. For the product roadmap, it's pretty straightforward. The first technique I like to use is to look at semantic dependencies between the goals. Then if you can remember the sample or the roadmap example that I shared with you, I prioritized, I ordered the goals in such a way that there was a meaningful progression, both from a user experience perspective as well as from a business perspective. So, from a user perspective, it was initially about developing an understanding of my eating habits and then starting to improve those eating habits, and then generally starting to change elements of my lifestyle. And from a business perspective, it was about initially acquiring a user base and then growing that user base, and then enticing people to subscribe to a premium version of my product and generating revenue. So, I was looking at dependencies both between those goals, both from a user perspective and from a business perspective, and that helped me prioritize them, order them. Now, that works well in my experience when you change your product. So particularly, for young products or products that are generally, where you add new value and, discernible value, I should say, from a user perspective. If your product is more in a stable phase where you focus more on incremental enhancements and maybe bug fixes, then that's kind of hard really to look at those kind of semantic dependencies between the goals and identify them, because often your goals are then more about fixing issues rather than adding new value. So it's more about maintaining the product, maintaining the value that you've created. And so often then you use your KPIs, your key performance indicators to determine goals. And maybe you want to increase engagement, or maybe you want to reduce cost. And then what I do is I look at cost of delay as a prioritization factor, and I try and figure out, okay, which has the worst impact on the users and on the business. Is it delaying, say, reducing cost or reducing churn, or is it delaying improving or sorting out some aspects of the technical debt that's been built up? Yeah. So use the semantic dependencies between goals and cost of delay to prioritize a product roadmap. And for the product backlog, I like to look at 3 factors. So try and keep it really simple. So the first one is risk, and those are user and business and technology related risks. The second one are dependencies. And the third one, what was the third one? I think the third one is about what needs to be completed in order to maximize value creation. So typically when you start with risk prioritized product backlogs, you end up creating a little bit like it looks a little bit like when you start building a puzzle. You've got the individual pieces there, but you can't quite figure out the complete picture. And so once you've addressed the key risks, it's important to understand then which of those features should you complete in order to maximize the chances of meeting your product goal, and which ones can you maybe only deliver and they're partially completed, or they're not polished and it's still going to be okay. So an example would be when the first iPhone shipped, Apple decided to delay the feature of being able to send send text messages to multiple recipients. So, you'd think that's a basic feature, it's a must-have feature, but Apple figured, well, for their target group, it wasn't critical to have that feature, so they shipped it without it. And then I think a couple of months later or so, they did a software update where that feature was included. The second question is, what if the connection of a goal to the product vision isn't obvious? So I guess we're talking here about a product goal, a roadmap goal, and that is perfectly okay. I wouldn't expect that the connection between a goal on a product roadmap and the vision is obvious. Hence my recommendation to take that intermediate step and have a vision as a big aspirational goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal, as some people put it, that maybe covers a time frame of 5 to 10 years and generally speaking is stable. And then have a product strategy that describes the approach to reaching the vision and the approach that we've chosen to achieve product success. And in that strategy, I'd capture needs, and you can think of those needs also as user and customer goals, and the desired business benefits, the business goals. And the connection to the needs and the business goals, that should be fairly clear. Otherwise, I'd ask, well, why do you have those goals on your product roadmap? So in other terms, the product strategy, a validated product strategy, should really guide your road mapping decisions. And then we have a question here around preparing the Go product roadmap. Who should be involved and how often should we revise it? I think the revision I've addressed. So, as a rule of thumb, start with quarterly reviews. Who should be involved? Again, I think I briefly touched upon it, but I'll sort of say it again. The Scrum product owner, then the development team members or representatives from the development team. That's important to leverage people's solution-oriented knowledge about UX and technologies and Q&A, and also create a shared understanding and secure support. And then the key stakeholders, those are the stakeholders whose expertise you need to make the right product decisions. And then if it's a large product and there are other product people involved in order to collaboratively manage that product, then those product people should be involved as well. Yeah. And how to prepare it? Well, the preparation that you need is really that you have, I would argue, that you have this validated product strategy in place. So, you know, one of the root causes I find why people struggle with product or roadmaps is, you know, first of all, because they use feature-based roadmaps, and I've talked about this, so don't do that. But then when it comes to goal-oriented outcome-based roadmaps, because people don't have a validated product strategy in place. And again, then it becomes very difficult to choose the right goals. It becomes very difficult to prioritize those goals. It becomes very difficult to understand how soon could those goals be delivered. You just lack the knowledge, basically, to make the right road mapping decisions. And then the last question that I see here is, any advice what some of the best roadmap metrics might be, please? Yeah, another great question. Thank you for asking those questions again. Now, I'm sometimes asked what metrics should be used or what KPIs should be used. And I tend to say, I can't tell you. I can't tell you without looking at your goals. So generally speaking, your metrics and your key performance indicators should always be based on your goals. So first figure out the needs and the business goals in your strategy. Second, figure out what product goals you want to address over the next 6 to 12 months and capture them on your product roadmap. And with those goals in place, you should hopefully then be able to identify metrics, certainly with your product goals in place on the roadmap, assuming that those goals are specific. You know, and then, you know, you might have a goal and I mean, in addition to that, you know, I'd say you want to probably think about a few metrics that help you understand how healthy the product is and how healthy the team is. So you probably want to track at least one code quality metric, and you probably want to track something like sustainable pace or team motivation. It might be generating a lot of money. Everybody might be super happy. But if the code quality is deteriorating, or if the development team is overworked, people are getting worn out, getting tired, starting to make mistakes, you know, trouble's around the corner. So you probably want to track those aspects.